I'm pregnant, and you're the father.
No, I don't believe you.
Please. I'm telling you the truth.
Leave, and don't ever come back.
Her heart shattered with every step she took away from the man she loved. She never imagined that sharing the happiest news of her life would become the most painful moment she had ever faced. He believed he had made the right decision, but he had no idea that one day he would discover a truth that would change everything. The tears she cried that day would become the beginning of a journey filled with heartbreak, hope, and unexpected redemption. This is how it all started. 6 months earlier, Sarah and David were known as one of the happiest young couples in their neighborhood. They dreamed of building a future together, believing that nothing could ever separate them. Sarah was a kind and hardworking young woman who always put others before herself. Her gentle heart and unwavering loyalty made everyone believe that she would one day become a wonderful wife and mother. David was ambitious and determined to become successful. He worked long hours chasing his dreams, promising Sarah that all his sacrifices would one day give them a better life together. Neither of them realized that one unexpected moment would test their love in ways they had never imagined. The journey that had begun with hope was about to become the greatest challenge either of them had ever faced. As the months passed, Sarah and David's love grew stronger with each passing day. They often spoke about getting married, building a happy home, and raising a beautiful family together. Every evening after work, they met at their favorite cafe to talk about their dreams. Sarah believed that no matter how difficult life became, they would always face it together. David looked into Sarah's eyes and promised that he would never leave her side. His words filled her heart with hope, making her believe that their love could overcome any obstacle. But life has a way of testing even the strongest promises. Neither Sarah nor David knew that one unexpected piece of news would soon change everything they believed about love and trust. One quiet afternoon, Sarah began to notice that something felt different. She felt unusually tired, became sensitive to certain smells, and couldn't explain the strange changes happening in her body. After several days, she decided to visit a nearby clinic, hoping to understand what was happening. She sat in the waiting room with a mixture of hope and nervousness, praying for good news. A few minutes later, the doctor returned with a warm smile and gently handed her the test results. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the words that would change her life forever. She was going to become a mother. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she placed a hand on her stomach. She couldn't wait to share the wonderful news with David, believing he would be just as happy as she was. With tears of happiness still in her eyes, Sarah left the clinic holding the medical report tightly against her chest. Every step she took was filled with excitement as she imagined David's reaction to the wonderful news. On her way home, she stopped at a small baby shop and smiled as she admired tiny baby clothes and little shoes displayed in the window. In her heart, she pictured David holding their child for the very first time, believing this would be the happiest day of his life. That evening, Sarah carefully wrapped the pregnancy test and the doctor's report inside a small gift box. She wanted to surprise David with a moment they would remember forever, never imagining that their joyful celebration would soon become heartbreaking. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the city skyline, Sarah took a deep breath and walked toward David's apartment. She whispered a quiet prayer, hoping that the man she loved would welcome both her and the precious new life growing inside her. Sarah knocked gently on David's apartment door, her heart racing with excitement. She could hardly keep the smile off her face as she imagined the happiness they were about to share together. When David opened the door, Sarah handed him the beautifully wrapped gift box with trembling hands. "I have something special for you," she said softly, her eyes shining with joy and hope. David smiled with curiosity and slowly opened the box. Inside, he found the pregnancy test and the doctor's report. For a brief moment, the room fell completely silent as he stared at them. Sarah waited eagerly for him to embrace her, but instead, the expression on David's face slowly changed. The smile disappeared from his lips, and the joyful moment Sarah had dreamed about suddenly began to turn into every mother's worst nightmare. David's hands began to tremble as he looked from the pregnancy test to Sarah's hopeful face. Instead of the joy she had expected, his eyes filled with doubt, confusion, and fear. Without saying a word, he placed the gift box on the table and slowly stepped away from her. Sarah's smile faded as she realized that something was terribly wrong. David shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't accept what he had just seen, and questions began racing through his mind faster than he could answer them. Sarah reached for his hand, hoping to comfort him and explain everything. But before she could speak, David's painful reaction shattered the beautiful future she had imagined only moments before. David finally broke the silence, but the words that came out of his mouth pierced Sarah's heart like a knife. Instead of celebrating the news, he questioned the one person who had always stood faithfully by his side. Sarah tried to explain through her tears, reminding him of the dreams they had shared and the future they had planned together. But fear had already clouded David's judgment, making it impossible for him to see the truth standing before him. Every promise he had once made suddenly felt distant and empty. The apartment that had once been filled with laughter now echoed with heartbreak, as the woman he loved stood there feeling more alone than ever before. Holding back her tears, Sarah quietly picked up the gift box from the table. She never imagined that the happiest surprise of her life would end with the man she trusted asking her to leave. Sarah stepped out of David's apartment with tears streaming down her face, holding the small gift box tightly against her chest. The cold evening breeze brushed across her face, but it could never compare to the pain she felt inside. Every step away from the apartment felt heavier than the last. She wasn't just walking away from the man she loved, she was walking away from the future they had planned together. When she finally reached home, her mother immediately noticed the tears in her daughter's eyes. Without asking a single question, she wrapped Sarah in a warm embrace, knowing that some heartbreaks are too painful for words. As Sarah broke down in her mother's arms, she whispered through her tears, "Mom, he doesn't believe the baby is his." Those heartbreaking words left both women in tears, unaware that the truth would one day change David's life forever. The next morning, Sarah woke up with swollen eyes after crying through the night. Even though her heart was broken, she knew she had to stay strong not only for herself, but for the little life growing inside her. Her mother gently held her hand and reminded her that difficult moments do not last forever. She promised Sarah that she would never have to face the journey of motherhood alone. Meanwhile, David tried to continue with his daily routine, convincing himself that he had made the right decision. But deep inside, an uneasy feeling refused to leave him, and the memory of Sarah's tearful face followed him wherever he went. Neither of them knew that the truth was already finding its way to David. Before long, he would be forced to face a reality that would make him regret the decision he had made on the day Sarah needed him the most. Days turned into weeks, and although David tried to forget everything that had happened, peace never returned to his heart. Sarah's tear-filled eyes and the painful words she spoke before leaving replayed in his mind every single day. One afternoon, while cleaning his apartment, David noticed that Sarah had accidentally left behind a small envelope. Curious, he picked it up and slowly opened it, never expecting that what he was about to read would shake him to his core. Inside were the doctor's report, the pregnancy confirmation, and a handwritten letter from Sarah. As he read each line, his hands began to tremble, and tears slowly filled his eyes for the first time. Sarah had never asked him for money or sympathy. She had only hoped they would face the future together as a family. And in that heartbreaking moment, David realized he had pushed away the woman who needed him most. Overwhelmed with guilt, David could no longer sit still. He rushed out of his apartment, holding Sarah's letter tightly in his hand, determined to find the woman he had so deeply hurt. Every step reminded him of the promises he had once made to protect and stand beside her. Now those promises echoed painfully in his heart, making him realize that fear had blinded him to the truth. Meanwhile, Sarah was attending her regular prenatal checkup with her mother by her side. Although she still carried the pain of rejection, she chose to focus on the precious life growing inside her, finding strength for the journey ahead. As David searched from place to place, he prayed that he wasn't too late. He knew that asking for forgiveness would be the hardest thing he had ever done, but he was ready to face the consequences of his mistake. After hours of searching, David finally found Sarah sitting quietly on a bench outside the clinic. She gently rested one hand on her growing baby bump while her mother sat beside her, offering silent comfort and unwavering support. David walked toward her with slow, trembling steps. The confident man Sarah had once known was gone, replaced by someone carrying the heavy weight of regret and the pain of his own mistake. Before Sarah could say a single word, David fell to his knees in front of her. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I let my fear destroy the most precious gift God had given us." Sarah looked into David's tear-filled eyes without speaking. Her heart was still broken, and although she could see his regret was real, she knew that forgiveness would not erase the pain he had caused. Sarah's mother quietly stood up and stepped back, giving the two of them a chance to speak alone. The silence between Sarah and David felt heavier than any words either of them could say. David looked into Sarah's eyes, tears running freely down his face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered, "but every day without you has shown me how badly I failed you and our child." Sarah gently placed a hand on her baby bump before looking back at David. "You didn't just stop believing in me," she said softly. "You rejected the child we created together when we both needed your love the most." David lowered his head in shame, unable to hold back his tears. In that moment, he understood that asking for forgiveness was easy, but earning back trust would take far more than words. Sarah remained silent for a long moment, searching David's face for the man she had once trusted with all her heart. She could see his regret was real, but the pain of being abandoned during the most vulnerable moment of her life still weighed heavily on her soul. David slowly reached into his pocket and took out the tiny pair of baby shoes Sarah had admired weeks earlier. "I went back to the shop," he said through tears. "Every day I looked at these, wishing I could go back and change the moment I broke your heart." Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears as she gently held the tiny shoes in her hands. They were a reminder not only of the dreams they once shared, but also of everything that had been lost because fear had replaced trust. Looking into David's eyes, Sarah spoke with quiet strength. "I can't pretend the pain never happened," she said softly, "but if we're going to give this child a future filled with love, your actions must prove what your words cannot." David nodded with tears in his eyes, knowing that words alone could never heal the wounds he had caused. From that day forward, he chose not to make empty promises, but to prove, through every action, that he wanted to become the father and partner Sarah deserved. As the months passed, David never missed a single prenatal appointment. He stood beside Sarah during every checkup, held her hand through every difficult moment, and slowly began rebuilding the trust he had once broken. Sarah watched his quiet determination with a guarded heart. She didn't forgive him because he asked for forgiveness, she forgave him because day after day, he showed genuine change through patience, responsibility, and unwavering support. One afternoon, the doctor smiled as she listened to the baby's heartbeat. David gently placed his hand on Sarah's growing baby bump, and for the first time since that heartbreaking day, both of them smiled through tears, filled with hope for the future they were choosing to rebuild together. A few months later, the day they had been waiting for finally arrived. Sarah went into labor, and David rushed her to the hospital, holding her hand the entire journey as he whispered, "I'm here, and I'm not leaving your side again." Hours passed inside the delivery room as Sarah fought through pain with incredible courage. David waited anxiously outside, praying with tears in his eyes and hoping that both Sarah and their baby would be safe. Suddenly, the delivery room doors opened, and the doctor stepped out with a warm smile. "Congratulations," she said. "You have a healthy baby." At that moment, David fell to his knees, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. When he finally held his newborn child for the first time, tears streamed down his face. He looked at Sarah and softly said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance to become the father I should have been from the very beginning." As David gently rocked his newborn baby to sleep, he couldn't stop thinking about the day he had almost walked away from his own family. Looking into his child's tiny eyes, he realized how close he had come to losing the greatest blessing of his life. Turning toward Sarah, David took her hand and spoke from the depths of his heart, "You believed in me, even after I gave you every reason not to. I promise that from this day forward, our child will always know what it means to be loved." Sarah smiled through happy tears as she watched David lovingly cradle their baby. The pain of the past would never disappear completely, but together they had chosen forgiveness, healing, and a new beginning for the sake of their family. The room filled with quiet laughter as the tiny baby wrapped a little hand around David's finger. In that simple moment, they realized that love becomes strongest when it is built on trust, humility, and the courage to change. 1 year later, their home was once again filled with laughter instead of tears. The tiny baby who had once been the cause of doubt had become the greatest source of joy in their lives. David had completely changed. He became a loving father who never missed bedtime stories, family dinners, or the precious little moments that reminded him how valuable his family truly was. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, David held Sarah's hand and smiled. "Thank you for believing that people can change," he said softly. "Because of your strength, Our child is growing up in a home filled with love instead of regret. Sarah looked at their child playing happily in the garden and leaned gently against David's shoulder. In that peaceful moment, they both understood that forgiveness had not erased the past, it had given them the courage to build a better future together. Years later, Sarah and David stood together, watching their child run through the garden with laughter that filled their home with joy. Looking at their happy family, they both remembered the painful day when fear had nearly destroyed everything they loved. David gently held Sarah's hand and smiled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "You didn't just give me a beautiful child, you gave me the chance to become a better man." Sarah looked at him with a peaceful smile. She had learned that forgiveness is never about forgetting the pain, but about giving love the opportunity to heal what once seemed impossible to repair. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, their little child ran into their arms, laughing with pure happiness. In that beautiful moment, they realized that the strongest families are not the ones that never face storms, but the ones that choose love, truth, and forgiveness through every storm together. Fear can break trust, but truth, forgiveness, and love can build a family that lasts forever.